I still remember the smell of lilies that morning, sweet, heavy, and suffocating. They lined the church walls, mixed with the scent of wet coats and grief. My father's funeral felt like a bad dream, stitched together by polite whispers and hollow condolences. Everyone looked at me with pity, calling me strong, as if that word meant anything when your whole world had just been buried 6 feet under. Mom wasn't there. Her seat, right beside mine, remained empty. A void that screamed louder than any prayer. I told everyone she wasn't feeling well, that she couldn't bear to see the coffin, but inside I knew that wasn't true. My mother had always been good at appearances. Too good. She had left 2 days earlier, saying she needed space to clear her mind. I believed her, or maybe I wanted to, because the thought of her walking away from Dad's final goodbye felt like betrayal itself. I kept waiting for her, hoping she'd walk through those doors, mascara running, pretending to care. But the doors stayed shut. After the service, I went home to an empty house filled with ghosts. My father's shoes still sat by the door. His favorite mug was still in the sink. His jacket hung on the chair as if he'd just step back in and laugh about the whole thing. But he wouldn't. And Mom? Well, she hadn't even called. By nightfall, my grief turned to anger. I stared at my phone, rereading her last message. "Don't wait for me tonight. I'll be home soon, promise. Soon." That word burned. Around midnight, unable to sleep, I opened Dad's laptop. Something I hadn't touched since he passed. Maybe I wanted to feel close to him again. Or maybe deep down I wanted answers. That's when I saw the email, not from him but from her, sent a week before his death. The subject line read, "He suspects something." My hands went cold. I clicked it open. It wasn't addressed to Dad. It was from Mom's account. To someone named Ethan. The message was short, almost careless. "He's been asking questions. I'll handle it. Don't call for a while." My chest tightened. Ethan. The name felt like poison. I scrolled through her inbox, my heart pounding faster with every line of flirtation. Every, "I miss you," every, "can't wait to see you again." There were dozens of them. Photos, hotel bookings, flight confirmations. And the latest one, sent 3 days ago, confirmed everything. "See you in Venice." Finally, just us. Venice. That's where she was, while I stood over my father's coffin, delivering a eulogy she should have given. Something inside me cracked that night. The kind of crack that doesn't heal right. I could almost hear Dad's voice echoing in my mind, his gentle laugh, his trust in her. My stomach twisted with disgust. My mother hadn't just betrayed him while he was alive. She'd dishonored him in death. I sat there in the dark, staring at her messages, my tears drying into something harder. The girl who once tried to protect her mother's reputation died that night too. What replaced her was quiet, cold, and deliberate. She thought no one would find out. She thought her lies were safe buried under grief. But she was wrong. Because that night, as the rain started to fall outside and the clock struck 2, I made a silent promise to my father. I would make her remember him. Not as the man she cheated on, but as the man whose daughter would never let her forget what she'd done. And as for Ethan, he wouldn't stay a secret for long. The morning after the funeral, the house was unbearably silent. Even the ticking clock sounded too loud, as if time itself was mocking me for still being here while everything that mattered had already gone. I made coffee just for the habit of it, but the cup trembled in my hands. My mother still hadn't called, not once, not even a message to ask how it went. That's when I realized I couldn't just sit and drown in her absence. I needed to know everything. I started with the email trail. Every message she'd sent to that man, every picture, every lie dressed as love. Venice was the key. I checked her calendar app, and there it was. Conference in Italy, 4 days. A convenient excuse. She even used her company's name to book the tickets. The nerve of her. When I opened the airline confirmation, I saw her seat number. And next to it, another name. Ethan Rhodes. I whispered it out loud, tasting the bitterness of it. My mother and her lover, traveling together while the rest of us buried my father. I looked him up. It didn't take long. He was easy to find. A photographer, divorced, mid-40s, with a smug smile in every picture. He ran a small studio downtown, the kind that tried too hard to look artistic. There were photos of him at events, and in 2 of them, my mother stood just off to the side, smiling. The same smile she used to give my dad when she thought no one was looking. That's when the first wave of disgust hit me. She wasn't grieving. She was free. I stared at their photos for a long time until my anger turned into something colder. Calculation. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted her to feel what my father must have felt before he died. The paranoia, the betrayal, the slow decay of trust. I started planning. First, I called her office pretending to be from the airline. The receptionist confirmed she was indeed on an overseas business trip. Then, I used one of Dad's old accounts to send her a scheduled email, something subtle. It simply said, "We need to talk about Ethan." I wanted to see how she'd react when she got back. Next, I dug deeper into Ethan's world. His social media was full of landscapes, lonely beaches, and artistic captions about truth and beauty. Hypocrite. But the more I scrolled, the more I noticed something. His posts stopped abruptly right after the funeral date. No new uploads, no updates, nothing. It was as if both of them had gone completely silent. For 2 days, I heard nothing from her. No calls, no messages, until the 3rd night. My phone buzzed at 3:07 a.m. It was a text from her. "Just one line, I'll be home tomorrow. Please don't judge me until I explain." I stared at the screen for a long time. Explain what? That she traded loyalty for lust? That she couldn't even attend her husband's funeral because she was too busy living her secret life? I didn't reply. I wanted her to stew in that silence. The next evening, I heard the sound of her suitcase rolling across the hallway. When I looked up from the couch, she stood there. Perfectly dressed, hair smooth, perfume sharp enough to cut through guilt. She smiled faintly and said, "You look tired." I didn't answer. She poured herself wine, as if she hadn't been gone, as if nothing had happened. But I could see something in her eyes. A flicker of fear, maybe. Or guilt. I couldn't tell which, but I knew one thing. She was hiding more than she'd ever admit. "Venice was beautiful," she said casually. "You'd love it someday, Venice." The word made my chest tighten. I leaned back, pretending to be calm, and asked, "Was the conference worth missing Dad's funeral?" Her face went pale. The glass froze in her hand. "What are you talking about?" I smiled faintly. "The conference. Or should I say, your trip with Ethan?" For a moment, the world stood still. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. And then, her voice cracked. "How do you know that name?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her silence was proof enough. That night, after she went to her room, I stood outside her door listening to her sob quietly. Not the kind of crying that comes from regret, but from fear. And that sound, that small sound of breaking, was the first time since Dad's death that I felt something close to peace. But peace wasn't enough, because I wasn't done yet, not even close. The next few days were a quiet war. The house was filled with the scent of unease, lavender candles burning over guilt, soft music trying to drown out suspicion. My mother moved through the rooms like a ghost rehearsing normalcy. She cooked breakfast. She asked if I'd eaten. She even smiled sometimes. But her eyes told the truth. She knew I knew. I didn't confront her again. Not directly. I didn't have to. Silence was sharper than any argument, and I made sure she felt it every second. Each morning I left her small reminders. Things only she would understand. A photo of Dad placed neatly on her dresser, his old cufflinks resting beside her coffee cup, his favorite tie draped over the chair she used at dinner. Nothing accusing. Nothing spoken, just ghosts. She started sleeping less. I'd hear her pacing the hallway at night, pausing outside my door, as if she wanted to talk, but couldn't find the words. Sometimes she'd whisper his name, my father's name, under her breath, like a confession only the dark was allowed to hear. By the 3rd night, I noticed something new. She'd begun locking her phone. She used to leave it on the counter, screen open, calls coming in without worry. Now it was always face down, protected by a new password. That told me two things. Ethan wasn't gone, and she was terrified I might see what came next. So, I gave her something to be terrified about. I created a new email address using my father's old initials. Then late at night, I sent her a message. You thought Venice was your escape, didn't you? Some secrets don't stay buried, no name, no context. Just the kind of message that makes guilt crawl under your skin and refuse to leave. She read it at 2:14 a.m. I knew because I heard her phone buzz and the faint gasp that followed. I watched her light flick on through the crack of my door, then footsteps rushing toward the window. She looked outside, scanning the street as if expecting someone to be there. The next morning, her eyes were swollen. She didn't mention the email, but her hands shook as she poured her coffee. When I sat across from her, she asked softly, "Do you ever feel like he's still here?" I held her gaze and said, "All the time." That afternoon, I found her sitting in Dad's old office, clutching one of his journals. She didn't notice me watching from the doorway. She was whispering something to herself, over and over. When I leaned closer, I realized what it was. I didn't mean for it to happen. Those words confirmed everything I needed to know. Not just that she had betrayed him, but that somewhere inside her, the weight of it was finally suffocating her. Still, part of me wanted to hear her admit it out loud. I needed the truth to leave her lips, not just hang between us like an unspoken disease. So, I started asking small questions. Who was calling you that night? Why did you really go to Venice? Did you love him? Each one left her a little more broken, a little more desperate. Her answers were half-truths, contradictions, lies dressed as grief. I didn't push too hard, not yet. I wanted the cracks to widen naturally. The breaking point came one evening when she found me sitting in Dad's chair, scrolling through her old photos. Her face went white. "Don't go through those," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "Why not?" I asked, not looking up. "Afraid I'll find another memory you forgot to delete?" Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for the phone, but I didn't move. We stayed like that, frozen, inches apart, both pretending there was still something left to salvage. Finally, she whispered, "You don't understand." I met her eyes. "Then make me." She opened her mouth as if to explain, but then she stopped, like she couldn't decide whether to defend herself or finally surrender to the truth. Instead, she turned away, muttering, "It's not what you think." But it was. That night, she packed a small bag and left the house without saying where she was going. I followed her car quietly through the rain, headlights dimmed, heart steady. She didn't drive far. Just across town, to a place I already knew too well, Ethan's studio. I parked a block away, watching her step into the warm light of the building, where he stood waiting by the door. He didn't even look guilty. He smiled when he saw her, pulled her into his arms like nothing had happened. And that's when I knew. They still thought they were safe. But soon, neither of them would be. Because I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore. I was the consequence of their choices. The next evening, I returned to Ethan's studio. Not to watch this time, to witness. I waited until the lights dimmed, until their laughter faded into the kind of silence that only follows comfort. Then I stepped closer, peering through the glass just enough to see her. My mother, the same woman who once told me that loyalty was love's purest form, now whispering to a man who wasn't my father, her fingers tracing his jaw as if she hadn't just buried the man she vowed to love forever. I should have felt fury, but what I felt was worse, a hollow sort of sadness, like standing inside a memory that had rotted from the inside out. When she finally left, I followed her home again, her taillights flickering through the fog. I parked 2 houses away, watching as she carried herself inside like nothing had happened. She didn't notice the small box sitting on the doorstep, the one I left earlier that day. Inside that box was a single photo. Dad, smiling. A red line drawn across the frame, the same way she'd drawn one through him when she chose Ethan. The next morning, she found it. She didn't scream. She just stared at it, her hand shaking. I watched from the hallway as her breathing grew uneven, her shoulders trembling. She whispered his name again, softly, like a prayer she didn't deserve to say. Later that day, I went into her room while she was in the shower. Her suitcase was half-packed, clothes scattered like panic. On her dresser sat her phone, unlocked for once. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. There were new messages from Ethan. The first few were ordinary. Miss you already. Can't stop thinking about you. But the last one was different. She knows. We need to be careful, she had told him. That single message made my throat burn. She didn't just betray Dad. She betrayed me by choosing her lover over the truth. Instead of remorse, she'd run to him, seeking comfort in the same arms that destroyed our family. I put her phone back and left her room quietly, but something inside me shifted. The revenge I'd been planning no longer felt like vengeance. It felt like justice. The only way to make her understand what it meant to lose everything, because of a choice she thought she could hide behind lies. That night, when she came to my room and softly asked, "Can we talk?" I just smiled. "Of course," I said. But what I meant was, you've already said enough, because the next part wouldn't be about confrontation. It would be about exposure. And I knew exactly where to start. Once the shame had settled into the house like dust, I stopped moving from impulse and began to move with purpose. Grief was a weapon when shaped carefully. It could cut through pretense and leave truth raw. My plan wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It only needed to make her feel the exact thing she'd given my father. The slow, inescapable unraveling of trust. First, I gathered evidence, not to blackmail, not for money, but to build a ledger of truth she couldn't deny. Flight confirmations, hotel receipts, the emails I'd already found, printed and stacked in a manila folder. I photocopied every photo where she and Ethan smiled like conspirators. I labeled them by date. Labels are clinical. They make lies look smaller when pinned to facts. Then I turned her world into a mirror. People hide in private, so I would make the private visible. I started with small exposures, public, plausible, and impossible to explain away. A bouquet of lilies left on her car with a note. "You left him for this." Not accusatory, just a cold observation. A postcard mailed anonymously to 2 of her close friends with a line from one of her messages. "See you in Venice." I never suggested anything crude. I only let the fragments speak. Gossip isn't a crime. Truth rarely is. But the heart of it was psychological. I wanted her to question what she remembered and who she could trust. I rewired the reliances in our home. I moved familiar items, Dad's watch placed where she kept her jewelry, his shaving brush set beside her toothbrush. Small dislocations that made her pause. I started answering the phone in the dead hours with a quiet, edited memory of her husband's voice. Stories he used to tell. Jokes only he knew. I watched her flinch. Watched the fabric of her composure fray when the house echoed with what she'd abandoned. I also used Ethan's pride against him. He liked being seen as untouchable, the artist with nobody to answer to. I found his gallery's public events, the local paper that once praised his raw truth portraits. I sent them a carefully worded tip. No threats, only facts and dates that tied his artistic retreats to the day my father was buried. I let them decide whether to look. People who sell themselves as fearless don't like the idea that their freedom has consequences. Most days I was patient. Revenge is patient when it's meant to educate. I didn't want to scream. I wanted a confession. I wanted her to sit with every refused funeral prayer, every lie, and see how small and naked it made her feel. The plan required time, a drip of revelations, a chorus of reminders, and the knowledge that when the final chord struck, she'd be looking at a life she'd knowingly dismantled. Still, I kept a line open for mercy. Sometimes I left a note in the kitchen. "He deserved your truth." A simple line, a plea disguised as reproach. I wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. I wanted consequences shaped to the crime, not humiliation that broke her, but memory that bound her. On the night I sent the last packet, the photos, the receipts, and a single printed copy of Ethan's message. She knows. We need to be careful. To the people she relied on most, I stood at the window and watched her silhouette move through the dim hall. Her shoulders were no longer the armor they once were. She moved like someone who'd begun learning how to be small again. When the first call came at dawn, it was quiet and efficient. A friend asking a direct question, another voice on speaker, the kind that demands explanation from its absence. I heard her inhale, then stumble, the way people do when they realize the floor they built their life on is shifting beneath them. This was not about punishment. It was about remembering, about making sure every face that had once sat at his table now remembered exactly who they were dealing with. I'd promised my father one thing that night in the dark. She would not forget him. I'd kept that promise. Now the rest would follow. Whether she begged, explained, or finally accepted the weight of the life she chose. The storm came quietly, not with shouting or slammed doors, but with whispers that spread like frost. Within a week, everyone who mattered to her knew. The friends she dined with, the neighbors who once called her the perfect wife, even the office she ruled with her polished charm. She tried to contain it, denied, deflected, rewrote timelines, but truth is like smoke. It seeps through every lock. I watched her retreat into herself. She stopped answering calls, stopped going to work. She'd stare at the window for hours, tracing her reflection like she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her phone stayed silent now. No messages from Ethan. No more misuser soon, my love. He'd vanished. At first, I wondered if he'd simply abandoned her, but then I saw the headline. Local photographer under investigation for misuse of grant funds. It wasn't me. I hadn't gone that far, but karma, I realized, doesn't need an invitation. The night I knew she'd finally broken, I found her sitting on the floor of Dad's old office, surrounded by boxes of his things. His watch, his letters, his old tie. She looked up when I entered, eyes red, voice small. Was it you? I didn't answer. I just leaned against the doorway and asked, which part? Her lips trembled. All of it. I took a slow breath, studying her. Was it you? I asked softly. The reason he died without peace? Her silence was louder than any confession. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity. Just an ache that sat somewhere between justice and loss. Finally, she whispered. He knew. I think he knew before he went. He stopped looking at me the same way. I thought I could fix it, but I didn't. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Because in that moment, she wasn't the woman who betrayed him. She was just human, flawed, guilty, broken. But still, it wasn't enough. Grief without consequence is only performance. I turned away, leaving her there in the dim light. You should tell him you're sorry, I said quietly. You owe him that much. The next morning, she did. I followed her to the cemetery, though she didn't see me. She knelt beside Dad's grave, her body shaking as she spoke to the dirt. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught pieces. Forgive me. I loved him. I was weak. When she left, I walked to the same spot and placed the final note I'd written weeks ago. He heard you. But I didn't. For the first time in months, I felt stillness. Not happiness, not closure, just stillness. Maybe that's all justice really is. That evening when I returned home, her car was gone. No note, no trace, just an empty house and a silence that didn't hurt anymore. But before dawn, I received one last message. No name, no number. Just words that glowed on my screen like an ending I wasn't sure I wanted to read. I'm sorry. I'm going somewhere to start over. You don't have to forgive me. Just live better than I did. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it, because forgiveness wasn't the point. Remembering was, and I remembered everything. The house felt different after she left. Not emptier, exactly. It was quieter, yes, but also heavier. Like the walls had absorbed every secret, every lie, every stolen moment. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, lingering on corners where memories of Dad still lingered. His presence wasn't gone. It never would be, but neither was hers, in the shadows she left behind. I thought I would feel triumph, a sense of victory for what I'd done. But revenge isn't that simple. The power I'd held over her, The control I'd exercised with precision, it came with its own cost. Nights spent planning, watching, waiting some more. The quiet torment of anticipating her guilt. It left me hollow in places I hadn't expected. Yet through it all, I also felt clarity. I had made her face the truth. I had made her understand the weight of betrayal. The letters, the emails, the photos. They weren't just tools. They were a reflection of consequences. A mirror showing her what she had taken for granted, what she had destroyed, and what she had lost. And in a strange, unspoken way, it was also a message to myself that no one could walk over the memory of my father, not even the person who should have loved him most. Weeks passed. Her absence became permanent. There were no calls, no returns, just the echo of her choices hanging in the house. I stopped checking the mailbox, stopped pretending the past could be rewritten. Instead, I began to live again, carefully, deliberately, carrying the lessons of betrayal as armor rather than chains. Sometimes I imagine her, alone somewhere far away, thinking of Venice, thinking of Ethan, thinking of Dad. I wonder if she feels the same hollow ache I sometimes feel. The knowledge that life she chose came at too high a price. And yet, despite it all, I've found a strange peace. Revenge didn't bring my father back. It didn't heal the absence in our home, but it gave me what I needed. Justice, yes, but also understanding. Understanding that the world can be cruel, that people can be selfish, and that sometimes the only way to honor those we've lost is to make sure the truth is never buried. I light a candle at his desk every morning now. Not in anger, not in sorrow, but as a promise. To remember, to protect, and to live with eyes wide open. The house is quiet. The grief is quieter, and I am still standing. Sometimes revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about truth. It's about showing the people who shattered trust that actions have weight, that betrayal leaves echoes long after words are forgotten. My mother chose her desire over loyalty, over love, over family, and in facing her, in holding her accountable, I realized that justice isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, precise, and unyielding. What I learned is this: when someone breaks the bonds you hold sacred, the only power you truly have is the courage to reclaim your own story, to watch, to wait, to act, and to never let lies linger in the shadows. Dad may be gone, but his memory became my guide, my compass through the darkness she tried to create. And in that, I found a truth stronger than grief, stronger than anger, a promise that betrayal will never go unanswered. This is Revenge Untold, where every secret finds its reckoning. Don't forget to subscribe.